It's an extremely interesting question because in 1976, I mean, basically what happened was that sterling was entering a crisis, and there was the Americans came in and helped. I mean, obviously this was all organised behind the scenes, supported sterling. Sterling recovered, but then they put in the bank manager, and of course the bank manager is the IMF. So, and the interesting thing is that the Chancellor at the time, Dennis Healey, was due to fly to New York for an IMF meeting. This was a general IMF meeting, and he was sitting in the, if you like, in the VIP lounge of at Heathrow Airport, having a gin and tonic, and he was told, there's a problem. We've got to go back. So, that was his trip to New York was cancelled, and he went back. What the IMF did was they had a series of secret meetings in Brown's Hotel, which is in the middle of London, in Mayfair, which wasn't meant to be known to anyone, but it was leaked to the press. And then the thing started kicking off. And basically, the IMF forced the British government into welfare cuts in public spending, all the sort of... they were crazy left-wing, just as they are today, literally. It's doppelganger, if you like, for what was happening today. Left-wing cabinet ministers like Michael Foot decided they couldn't go along with this, so he resigned, so he was forever to be forgotten. The medicine which the IMF forced us to take actually retrieved the situation. But part of that was that, already interest rates had risen quite high. We had also had a crisis before then. 1973, late 1973, the Bank of England raised interest rates because of a buyers' strike. This was not, the 76 was an ongoing problem, if you like, in that sense. When they raised interest rates in, I think it was late October 1973, that triggered what became known as the secondary banking crisis. Now, secondary bank, basically in those days, you didn't need to have a license to operate a bank. You just had to have the credibility behind you, if you like, a bit of capital, and so on. But these banks were almost exclusively involved in lending for commercial property development, and particularly office property development. There was a lot of speculation in it at the time. The increase in interest rates just collapsed the whole bubble. And I remember as a stockbroker on the floor of the House seeing the whole of the property sector. We had all these stocks. You had a jobbers board, and a jobber would specialize, say, in property stocks. And you had, I think, three firms of jobbers specializing. And the markdown, the sector was just wiped out, literally, in the space of a week. It was disastrous. It really was. Do the impossible thing, cut welfare payments, thought she would try and stimulate the economy by cutting taxes. And that pushed bond yields up and so on. So I suppose that's a sort of similar situation, but it's not quite. We have the same situation today, but the difference is, can the IMF come in and rescue us? I would suggest that the IMF, if it was free to act and had the power to act, would actually go and tell Donald Trump, look, come on, you've got to cut your spending. But, the problem is that the Americans own the bank manager. So the bank manager isn't going to turn around and tell the Americans what to do. So you can see that it's not just the UK this time. It's general. Virtually all the G7 are in the same problem. But the standout ones, if you like, in the sense of escalating welfare costs and the wrong side of the Laffer curve when it comes to getting tax revenue in, because they've already pushed tax revenues up. And it's now becoming self-defeating, in effect, in terms of revenue enhancement. Perhaps Italy, but with Maloney in charge, I think there is a sort of slightly more realistic approach to life there. Germany, they don't have quite the same debt to GDP problem, but they're going that way, with the new government. So that's not good. America has a slightly different problem. They've got, a president who is just completely out of control. So, his new wonderful spending bill, his tariffs actually haven't, they've produced a bit of revenue, like $500 million or something, but that's not the answer that Trump thought it would be. We'll replace all these income taxes and corporation taxes with tariffs. No way. That debt is now completely out of control because part of the problem is the president is out of control. So, it's really, 1976. We've got the same problem again in the UK, but also there are wider lessons, I think, for other G7 members. So what she did was she enhanced the cost of government by giving pay awards, I mean, particularly to National Health Service workers, bureaucrats, all sort of catching up, if you like. You can see the argument. And also, not at that stage part of government, but railway workers. And of course, the other promise is to renationalise the railways. So she incurred a lot of extra expenses in terms of government. Now, the other thing she did was obviously, the socialists think, well, the rich can pay for it. And so she started increasing taxes, like doing away with non-doms. She basically made it a lot more expensive for any wealth creator to stay in Britain. And so we've had an exodus of people who have gone to other centres like Dubai, Italy. I mean, God, I tell you what, you can live on Lake Como and commute into Milan and actually have a lovely lifestyle and all the rest of it. And, Bologna is, perfectly prepared to let you stay there and not be taxed on your worldwide earnings for a lump sum of, I think, 100,000 euros a year or something, which, if you're makes an awful lot of sense. And I think the head of Goldman Sachs in Europe has gone from London to Milan as a result. So the point about it is that we've got a very unbalanced tax system. The top 1% of earners pay 30% of all income tax. So we can't afford, from a fiscal point of view, to lose these people, but that's what's happened. She's also done other things which are really pure socialist. I mean, the sort of socialists in town, as it were, or in London, who actually have absolutely no concept of country affairs, agriculture, and things like that. They view, the farming community as the people who go out hunting foxes and killing them and shooting and doing all these sort of things. But the vast bulk of farmers actually, are really struggling. I mean, they always struggle. What she did was she turned around and said, right, okay, we're going to remove the inheritance tax concession, because the only way farmland can be passed from father to son, father to daughter, whatever, go down the generations. Finance any tax take, on succession. So, anyways, she has introduced that. She also introduced, so that's really upset a hell of a lot of people, and will backfire. There's no doubt about that in terms of food production. And the other thing she did was she decided to introduce VAT on public schools. Now, just for an international audience, to get around any confusion, a public school is in the private sector. Okay, the state system is the government public sector, if you like. So, when we say public schools, what we mean is private schools. And introducing VAT, which means that they can no longer have the benefits of charitable status, which most schools are. I mean, they just reinvest everything into the, into providing better education facilities and all the rest of it. And they run themselves generally pretty well. But they run as charities. Anyway, they've had the VAT concession on charities removed, which is, from a socialist idealist standpoint, one can understand that is, if you like, in that we want to destroy the bourgeoisie. Okay. But from a revenue point of view, it's the most stupid thing to do, because it's meant that quite a lot of schools are having to close down than any private system, which costs the taxpayer absolutely nothing. So, she's done a lot of things to increase expenses of government very substantially. And this is now backfiring. And the point about the article, which you referred to earlier, that I wrote, is that I think that the information that's coming in from HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is a department of the Treasury, is that the tax take is not, it's less than expected. And I think this is creating a bit of a crisis, if you like, in terms of Treasury policy. So, the way I put it was because she was crying in Parliament, and I think it's literally the whole thing just getting on top of her. Anyway, she's actually got a speech in Mansion House this evening. So they're now talking about introducing wealth taxes and so on. In other words, when they're in a hole and they're just digging deeper. Why? Because they cannot cut welfare costs. Welfare costs are spiraling out of control. It's not in the socialist playbook to cut welfare costs. Labour MPs are elected to enhance welfare, not cut it. And so there was parliamentary rebellion. So they've ended up not being able to cut any welfare expenses at all. So you can see that this is a situation which is leading into that I personally expect to see bond yields rising further because the risk associated with sterling bonds, gilts, I think is underestimated by foreign holders. And we have got a lot of gilts in foreign ownership at the moment. I don't know what the proportion is, but it's well over 30 or 40%. I mean, it's at least as bad as the situation the US Treasury is in, and probably worse. And I expect sterling to fall. At some stage, I think like a stone, probably at the time of the autumn statement. I don't know what the date of the autumn statement is, but we've got a lead on this perhaps with the Mansion House speech tonight, which is traditionally a point in the city where the Chancellor sort of, if you like, indicates a slight way forward and hopefully reassures the attendees from the city that she's actually quite sensible. Good luck with that one. But she's got herself into an impossible position. Why? Because when she was appointed Chancellor, Labour was elected, Socialists were elected. She pursued, payback time and far left socialist spending. And it's gone back to bite her. And as I say, when it comes to the Laffer curve, which socialists don't believe in, they deny it completely. Oh, that's just a load of nonsense. But, there does come a point where you start increasing the rates of taxation, your tax revenues go down. And that's where we are. We've got declining tax revenues. Oh, and the other thing I would put on top of that is that what she has done also with what we call, employer's stamp, which is like if you like, a tax on employment. She didn't actually increase it on the employees, but she increased it on businesses. And the result is that unemployment is now rising. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. It's driving the country into recession. I think the world is sort of either going into recession on the brink of it. Don't believe the government statistics. They are complete rubbish on this. I mean, just go around and look around you and see what's going on. So that's another reason that the tax takes are going down very substantially. I mean, one of the things is the property market. Oh, yeah, she, in effect, increased stamp duty, which is a turnover tax on property. And, by stopping previous reliefs, which were temporary. And what's happened, the whole of the property market has just seized up, partly because in London, all the people who can pay 10, 15 million for properties have gone or going. And around the country, people don't want to pay a 5% stamp duty. The cost of moving is just absolutely enormous. So we're all sitting in our houses. We might have sort of decided that we would like to buy another house, or renovate our houses or whatever. And the costs have just gone up and up and up and up. Nobody's doing it. And inflation is considerably more than the official statistics say, and they are rising. I mean, I wrote an article yesterday looking at the prospects, if you like, for base metal prices. I mean, they're going to be rising. And I think people are going to be very surprised how sharply they're going to rise.